I'm joined by John Perry, and we're going to go on to dig into the topic of mental health and mental toughness. Obviously, it's Mental Health Awareness Week today, so I thought it was pretty topical to look at this. So, yeah, I'll lead in, John, with a question there. Then, what do you see are the differences between mental toughness and mental health?
Yeah, thanks for that, David, and thanks for the invite. Um, look, mental health is an outcome, and because it's a really important outcome, we often think about like, well, you want to be well and happy and content and all those kind of things, but but you don't necessarily strive for those outcomes because well, they're situationally dependent as well. Like sometimes bad things happen, and we it's normal to not be that well when a really bad thing happens as well. So, like when we talk in sports psychology about outcome goals and stuff like that, we always say, okay, that's great as an outcome, but um, you don't strive for the outcome. You kind of look after the things that are perhaps a bit more controllable, and then the outcome will look after itself. And look, mental toughness is that kind of dispositional factor that allows you to take a bit of control over a situation. And when the bad stuff happens, it gives you that kind of buffer towards it. And it perhaps also gives you that sense of freedom and bravery, I guess, to be able to seek out situations where you might have those sort of positive experiences that impact on well-being as well. So I guess that's kind of how I'd always think about it, in that you've got these kind of situational factors, stuff that you encounter in life, and they'll impact on your well-being. Um, but in between there's this dispositional factor of mental toughness where we might be able to actually appraise the situation differently. That means that actually the bad situations don't have such a negative impact on our mental health, and the positive situations we're able to maximize those to maximize our well-being.
That makes a lot of sense. I know a framework I like to talk about when I'm talking about psychological well-being is the when you for those who know psychology well, self-determination theory, and where you look at the basic psychological needs of autonomy, competence, and relatedness. So if we go with the autonomy side of things, someone who's likely to be potentially struggling a little bit with their mental health can feel quite helpless, can't they?
Mm.
So trying to hand over some autonomy and a sense of control is a an important factor there.
Yeah, and it's a tough balance to strike because um, if someone's particularly not very well, um, there's a temptation actually to want someone else to take control of it, to look after me, because that kind of offloads all of the stress. And then I suppose when we start talking about positive well-being, we're trying to help people move from the kind of existing, being okay, through to the flourishing stage. And I think that's where self-determination theory can be particularly helpful, because that's where we see people generally wanting a little bit more autonomy and more control. There's some interesting, like the Whitehall studies, were some famous, very longitudinal um, health in work studies um, over several decades. And there were some interesting findings in there where they found that um, it was people working on the shop floor who were actually more likely to suffer from sort of heart disease and responses to stressful situations than the boss. Because we always think about the boss as being the one who's the most stressed. And while that's true, the boss also has more autonomy. So they're able to escape their stress or manipulate it a little bit. Whereas the people feeling helpless, who are kind of just directed to actually experience more of the slightly invisible but chronic stressors over a longer period of time. So I think you're dead right, but I think there's a distinction there between moving from struggling to being okay, the kind of drowning to being okay, and then from the being okay through to the flourishing end of things.
And from the mental toughness side of things, we're talking a lot about life control there, aren't we? So you end up feeling like you've got that can-do attitude, and yeah, you like you say, you feel like you're thriving as opposed to just surviving.
Yeah, a sense that you bring about your your experiences in life. Those things don't just happen to you. I always kind of flinch a little bit. You know, when people say things like, "Oh, knowing my luck," like it's never knowing my luck. I'm going to win Euro Millions on Friday night, or it's always a knowing my luck. Something bad will happen, and you think, although it's said flippantly without an awful lot of thought, it is that a bit of an insight to seeing your place in the world as this being that things happen to, rather than like Albert Bandura said, with self-fulfilling prophecy, we're the creators of our fortune, not simply foretellers of our fortune. And the language people use sometimes just gives you these little insights into whether they see themselves as the being that things happen to, or the one that kind of actually creates it and drives it.
Yeah. When you go back to the start of the conversation, you talked about outcome goals, and as a sports performer, you need to be focusing on the process, the ingredients of what actually is going to help you to be able to perform. There's definitely something in that, even from a well-being standpoint too.
Yeah, absolutely. There's the idea of like in sport performance, in goal setting, we talk about processes. You look after the process, and the performance kind of looks after itself. If you're looking after the performance and the process, the outcome will look after itself. And I'd encourage people to think about well-being in that way. Look after the processes for the situation. There's a temptation, especially with the amount of pop psych that's around, to think that you need to strive for and chase happiness all the time, and you really don't. Like, because happiness is like, it's a fleeting state. When good things happen, I want you to be in a position enough that you enjoy the good things and you kind of thrive on those. But when bad things happen, it's fine to not be happy as well. Like, that's actually okay. And I think sometimes learning to sort of think negatively and work through those is actually a sign of well-being as well. And I think sometimes we get that confusion that well-being means you're thinking positively all the time. And I think really it's about this relationship between your appraisal of the current situation and being at ease with how I think I should feel right now and how do I feel. And that's where sometimes I think the agenda gets a little bit confused.
Yeah, because I mean, let's face it. If I'll go back to like my personal story, I lost my wife over 10 years ago. So I'm going to be unhappy for a period. I'm going to be grieving, just like we both work with injured athletes. If they have a serious injury, you just wouldn't expect them to be over the moon with that. They're going to go through similar sort of things to grieving. They're going to lose their identity for a period if it's a serious injury. They're going to be down. They're going to be upset. All of those factors.
Yeah, and telling somebody to think positively, it's not going to get a great response. Like, because when you're in that moment, you think, no, but I think I should feel bad, and I'm happy feeling bad. Like when you're going through a process like that, feeling terrible is a normal, healthy thing. that's okay. And I think when you talk about the injury, there, kind of link that into some of the things we do in psychology and mental toughness and things like that. It's the value of understanding the individual is for the sake of understanding them, and that'll help you to have the kind of conversations that will take them forward. So, for example, if I was working with an injured athlete, I'd be interested in knowing their mental toughness or other related concepts, and I might measure things. But that's not because I want to go on this path of improving their mental toughness as such. But I want to be better informed about this individual and what makes them tick. So, for example, if someone had a long injury and they were looking at probably a 12-month layoff, a really goal-oriented individual, if you were to say, okay, here's where we're going to be in the next month, 3 months, 6 months, and they might find that quite motivating and positive and come out of that feeling better. But if someone just isn't very goal-oriented, then all of that, they're a bit more present focused. They're not really a future-focused person. Then that's just daunting and overwhelming, and just a re-emphasis of how far away from where I want to be. So for one person, that kind of goal setting for the future brings about positive responses, and for the other, it's actually just frustrating and annoyance and anger. So I wouldn't necessarily say that the point of learning about things like mental toughness is to improve it so they're okay, but it's to understand that individual. The individual who's low on goal orientation, well, actually, maybe I'm better off with that person just dealing with things day by day. And then next month, let's look at where you were a month ago and look back and go, oh God, now I can see I've actually improved a little bit. And that brings about more positive emotions than it would do looking forward.
That makes a lot of sense. So in effect, what you would end up doing is you would work with them to set daily goals. You might go as far ahead as a weekly goal, if you like.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. It's about knowing the individual, and I think this is why things like goal setting are so paradoxical, and we find such varied results in research, because for some people, the idea, some people are very diligent, very organized, very future focused, love the idea of being at step one of many and seeing what's ahead. But for some, that's simply a deficit model. That's where I want to be. That's where I am. So that's how far away I am from the thing I want. And even if I'm doing well, I'm still below where I want to be. And it brings about frustration. So I think a lot of what we do in terms of the psychometrics element and understanding the individual, it's to understand them, to have the right kind of conversations, not necessarily to go, I want to measure mental toughness or resilience or emotional intelligence or whatever it is because I want to develop them. Like, actually, sometimes just understanding the person is all we need from those.
And we talked a little bit off air before there about just knowing the person and the relationship, and just letting things flow is often one of the biggest skills of a practitioner.
Yeah, there's, as I say, it's we were talking about book writing off air, and the challenge is, of course, when you're writing a book, it's very easy to write a chapter saying, and now here's how you do this intervention, and here's how you do this, as if we can kind of just go, great, I'll take that in my toolbox and deliver that and it'll work. Whereas the reality is, as the consultant, the practitioner, the psychologist, whatever you might be, you're the tool. So you might use various techniques and interventions, but you're the tool. So even if you want to start using goal setting and imagery and visualization and positive self-talk and those kind of things, it's you that's doing it. And you're the one that's having the conversations around your experience. And often the bit that's successful is the conversation you have around the intervention that you're doing. So you could be introducing some goal setting, and you find somebody is successful later on, and it's very easy to attribute that success to the goal setting program. But actually, I suspect a lot of the time it was that while you were talking about their goals, you go off on tangents and you have these kind of fairly meaningful conversations, and something clicks. And it might just be an off the cuff remark, but any of us that have worked with athletes will know that they come back to you and say, oh, do you remember 6 months ago you said this? And you think, did I? I don't remember saying that. But it's those kind of just conversations you have around the thing you think you're doing that actually tends to land with people and have the longer term effects.
Yeah, those light bulb moments just take place. It's the best, one of the best parts of the job.
It is, yeah.
Well,
Nice
John,
when someone pulls out notes from, when they spoke to you ages ago, and you think, I don't even remember saying it, but
yeah. I've loved the conversation, John. I'm conscious of your time and the time now. There's some fantastic takeaways there for the viewers and listeners. So yeah, again, appreciate your time.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks for having me, David. All the best now.
Yeah, thank you.